Buckle your seatbelt. It's time for another episode of the Prepper Recon Podcast.
In the post-apocalyptic thriller, The Economic Collapse Chronicles by best-selling author Mark Goodwin, America is on the cusp of financial annihilation. Matt and Karen Baer thought they were prepared for anything, but can they survive a total collapse of the economic system? If they want to live through the crisis, they'll have to think fast and move quickly. In a world where all the rules have changed and savagery is law, those who hesitate pay with their lives. The Kindle edition of the Economic Collapse Chronicles is now available as a box set. Buy your copy at Amazon.com today.
Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, and water filters. Use coupon code PREPRECON for 5% off your order at CampingSurvival.com.
Hello?
Today's guest is Dr. Bones. Dr. Bones, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Mark. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's been way too long since we've had you on. So what's new at Doom and Bloom?
Well, we have been traveling around the country, usually in the spring and the summer and the early fall. We travel around spreading the word with regards to being medically prepared for times of trouble. There have been a lot of times of trouble. There are a lot of wildfires on the West Coast. There's floods in Louisiana. There were floods in West Virginia a while back. So there's always something going on that could put you out of reach of modern medical care, and we want to help the average person be an effective medic if they have to, put a medically prepared person in every family.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a lot of speculation about Zika, especially in the preparedness community, but it's rare that we actually get to talk with folks that are in the medical profession. So from your standpoint, and of course you kind of live near that ground zero for Zika,
right.
How serious do you think it is, and is it something you expect to die out this winter, or you think it's something that's going to keep spreading?
Well, I think that it's a serious thing if you're trying to get pregnant or if you are pregnant at the present time. You really have to change some of the things that you do. You have to put mosquito repellent on. You have to decide when you're going to go outside and when you're not going to go outside. If you're in the area where the mosquito that transmits the disease, the Aedes mosquito, Aedes, by the way, is the Greek word for unpleasant. So if that is your situation, then it's sort of a big deal. If you're not, let's say if you're, my age, going there essentially puts you at risk for getting the illness, which in about 20% of cases gives you a rash, a fever, gives you joint pains, and occasionally gives you something that looks a little bit like pink eye. But otherwise, for the most part, it isn't anything that's going to have a lasting effect. For pregnant ladies, though, can it certainly have a lasting effect, a lifetime effect on their newborn, and so for that reason, it is a major issue for them.
And you wrote a book about Zika, is that right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I wrote a book called The Zika Virus Handbook. Doctor explains all you need to know about the pandemic, and it is indeed a pandemic. I mean, it is in Africa, it's in Asia, it's in French Polynesia, it's in South America, it's in the Caribbean. Puerto Rico is in the midst of a raging epidemic of the disease, as a matter of fact. And now it is in the United States. As a matter of fact, the U.S. government has done an unprecedented action. It actually is telling Americans to stay away from a place in America because of risk of infectious disease. That's the first time that it has ever happened.
And as part of their concern is that they don't want it getting spread around the rest of the country, or is it just the concern for folks to not be infected and not and having the side effects of the birth problems and whatnot?
Well, I think it's both. It's certainly an issue for people that are considering pregnancy, but it's an issue in terms of passing it from place to place. There's already a gentleman who visited South Beach down here who came from Texas, and he came back to Texas sick. And so he's a man that's sick with Zika in Texas. And there are indeed Aedes mosquitoes in pretty good populations in most of Texas, certainly Louisiana, even worse now with the flooding. All that standing water is a great breeding ground for it. And so this is, I think, a big issue. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that there are already outbreaks elsewhere. It's just that we're not testing for them. As a matter of fact, Dr. Peter Hotez, who's the dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor University in Texas, believes that there are a number of outbreaks already throughout the warm weather states in the country, and it's just that we're just not testing for it. Here in South Florida, though, of course, we're testing a lot of people because we found some local cases.
And how far north can this particular breed of mosquito survive?
Well, there's a pretty good population of it in New York City, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow.
All right, and in the underground subway system and other areas that remain warm or they have heating during the winter, you can expect that the mosquito can probably survive a winter there. In some other areas, obviously not, but in places that have undergrounds and subways, things like that, those are areas that you can really expect, even if they're northern areas, to be an issue for Zika transmission. So as a matter of fact, New York City, I think, has the second highest number of cases, travel-related cases, due to the large Latin and Caribbean populations there.
And are there some lessons that we can learn about being prepared for outbreaks of this magnitude? Let's say it's something that's potentially more lethal than Zika.
It would depend on how that disease is passed. For example, Ebola, which is definitely more lethal than Zika, the issue is person-to-person contact. With Zika and with yellow fever, West Nile virus, other diseases like that, it's mosquito control. So from a mosquito control standpoint, you can do a number of things that would protect you, and that would be to eliminate standing water from your property. If you have stagnant water that's hanging around your property, that's important. If you live next to, for example, a vacant lot where people occasionally throw trash, an old tire, an empty can of food, that could accumulate a small amount of water, and that's plenty for the Aedes mosquito to produce the next generation. So the bottom line is to reduce the sources where mosquitoes can actually breed. So that's important that you can do that individually with your property. You can, in normal times, of course, the authorities are going to make an effort to deal with mosquito control, sometimes by aerial spraying like they're doing here. And you just have to be careful in terms of your activities. In areas, for example, where there is a lot of mosquitoes, I would probably stay indoors much of the day if I had to, or at least, let's say if it was bad, we were in some disaster situation, I would probably have wanted to put up screening. If I wasn't going to have electricity, I was going to be off the grid, I want to have some screening. You know, of course, tents, if you have to bug out and you're in a tent, a lot of these have sort of mosquito netting over the little windows that they or openings that they have for ventilation in tents. So I definitely make sure if you are in the market for a tent for this kind of purpose, in case we wind up off the grid, make sure that the openings for ventilation have screening.
That's a really, really good point. And while we're on the subject of sword, famine, and plague, what's up with these new super lice? Yeah,
you know, it's amazing. It's not only that we have now a new strain of lice that seems to be pretty resistant to all the usual things, Rid shampoo, Nix lotion, things like that. We're finding that it has taken over the entire ecological niche from normal lice. The super lice are now present in 48 states, and they are the only cause of infestation in 42 of those 48 states. And so now you have to either use multiple applications of these products, or you have to go to stronger products, some of which could be dangerous to kids. So it is a big issue.
Is there anything that it would be a little bit more holistic than the traditional treatments that you suspect would be effective against these?
Yeah, I think that if you put a lot of olive oil on kids' hair, for example, if you're worried about the head lice, head super lice, I think that if you put olive oil, I think if you put a lot of mayonnaise, lotions, things like that, but I mean, really put a lot of it on there, leave it there for hours, it will eventually destroy, by suffocation, a lot of these lice. Now, there are eggs, though, that are also associated with lice. Those are called nits, and those sometimes are a little more difficult to get rid of, so you may have to do applications of this, let's say, every week for a while for it to be effective. Another thing that's effective is heat. And so a lot of people are actually putting together businesses. There's one business called Lice Clinics of America, which has these super heaters or super hair dryers, let's call them, which it has heat and it has a lot of flow, which causes these lice to wind up being dehydrated and even dehydrates the eggs and kills them dead without using any chemicals.
Oh, wow. And these would look like the old hair dryers that you see back in the movies from the 70s and the 80s.
It looked like those old-timey hair dryers.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. The dollar's lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Silver, on the other hand, has proven to be a very stable form of wealth preservation over the years. And where do you buy silver? Silver.com, of course. Silver.com offers fantastic prices on gold and silver. Check out Silver.com today. Trading Post in the Woods is ran by veteran crisis responders who know how important it is to be prepared. They specialize in comprehensive natural survival remedy kits, preparedness and homesteading supplies, as well as skills training. Visit them online today at tradingpostinthewoods.com. It's been a really bad year for flood. My wife and I had the opportunity to go help the victims up in West Virginia, and while we were there, we both picked up rusty nails in the bottoms of our boots. Thankfully, they didn't penetrate through to our feet. But is dangerous debris something that people overlook in the aftermath of floods?
Yeah, people think that, if there's some floodwaters, that in general they can just walk through them if they're not, very, very deep. But a lot of these waters, first off, they're not clean, and so some of them can be murky, and you're going to not be able to see really all the way to the bottom. There's going to be a lot of debris, and you're going to wind up injuring yourself. And so this is something that's a big problem for a lot of the people that are in Louisiana, for example. There's still a lot of places where you really have to walk through water to get from place to place, and it can be a big problem. During the flood itself, of course, moving water can be very dangerous. A lot of the water is moving so quickly that it doesn't take a lot of depth of the water to actually knock you off your feet if you're walking through it. Less than a foot for people that are pedestrians. Actually, 2 feet or less will probably wash away most vehicles. Half of the people that were killed in the recent flooding in West Virginia and also in Louisiana were found in their cars.
That's horrific. And also in West Virginia, the floodwaters inundated the septic tanks and the sewage treatment facilities. So all of that waste was mixed into the water. What kind of risks are associated with contaminated water like that?
Wow, water everywhere and not a drop to drink, that's for sure. We have to realize that floodwater is absolutely not clean water, contaminated not only by debris, but as you mentioned, sometimes water treatment plants can be overflowed by them. And so what you have to do is you have to have either a good supply of bottled water, or you have to have a reliable way to purify water and get a good supply of clean water stored away. 16 drops, let's say, of household bleach might be good for about a gallon of water, a teaspoon for 5 gallons. That's something that you can do. You need a filter, however, to eliminate debris in the water. That is something that people, if you haven't gotten that yet, you probably should consider getting a good water filter.
And now let's say you get a small laceration from a piece of sharp debris, and then you come into contact with that contaminated water. Are there some risks that are associated with having a cut exposed to that contaminated water?
Well, yeah, even air, water, air, all has bacteria in it. A cut is open for more than 8 hours. That bacteria colonizes the inside of the wound. And it depends on what kind of cut we're talking about. If we're talking about a scrape or a scratch, we're probably not going to have a high level of infection. But if it goes down into the subcutaneous fat or goes below the dermis, which is the deep layer of the skin, the epidermis is the superficial layer, well, then in that circumstance, you really have a high risk for infection. And so you really have to have as part of your supplies, you got to have antiseptics. You got to clean that area out really well. You should have an irrigation syringe, a 60 or 100 cc irrigation syringe would be good, and really flush out with some force the debris that might be deep in that wound.
In the relief organization we worked with, they didn't provide any first aid kits. Of course, we had our own kits, but most of the folks working in those with those organizations, most of those folks are not preppers. Is that something you think folks need to consider if they're going to go work in relief on a regular basis, that they should have a good first aid kit to take with them?
I think it's awesome, Mark, that people volunteer to help out in disasters. We were in a DMAT team in Hurricane Andrew many, many years ago when I was younger. And this is something that's really, really important for people to think about. You should always have prepared, not only for helping other people, but maybe even for yourself. You should always have materials that are going to help get you through the next few days if you had to hit the road. And there are a lot of circumstances, floods, there are flood warnings or tornado warnings, hurricane watches, all sorts of reasons why it may be wise to get out of Dodge. And if you have to go quickly, if you don't already have things packed away, batteries, light sources, heat sources, bottled water, non-perishable food, extra clothing, a medical kit, well, then you're going to have a tougher time helping other people, and you're going to have a tougher time helping yourself in these kinds of disasters.
Yeah, very, very well said. Yeah, if you're not able to take care of yourself, then you're part of the problem. If you can at least take care of yourself, you can at least remove yourself from being part of the problem, so that assets and can be directed to other folks that need it more. And then if you have a little bit more than what you need, now you can be part of the solution. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I would, not only do I recommend that you have a good amount of medical supplies, but I would always say that you should have more than what you think you actually need, because you're always going to come across somebody that's going to need your help that did not prepare medically. And if you, in true long-term disaster settings, if you are known as a person who has some medical skills and has some supplies and willing to help people that are injured or ill, well, the community around you of survivors will wind up considering you so valuable that they'll expend resources to protect you. So I think that's something that's very, very important.
And I saw you had a post on doomandbloom.net on how to make your own penicillin. Is that something pretty much anybody can do, or is this a real complicated procedure?
It's something anybody can do that has a PhD in chemistry. What a mess. I'll tell you, I looked at that and I said to myself, it's funny because people think that penicillin is just mold. Well, it isn't really. It's mold that has been stressed in a certain way chemically, and that produces the actual antibiotic substance. And so that's the thing. So you need all sorts of different things. I don't have the list with me right here, but you can find it on the website. It's called, I think, what did I call it? The Formula for Making Penicillin? I think so. And you can see that it involves a number of different steps. You need to have a few chemical flasks and separator funnels, and it is just a difficult thing to be able to make yourself. And so for that reason, I tell people to consider aquarium and avian antibiotics. As you know, Mark, I was the first doctor to actually write about these things, And I still feel strongly that these are going to prevent some avoidable deaths in times of trouble.
So pointing and clicking from your local survival store provider that sells fish antibiotics has got a little bit shorter learning curve than actually producing it yourself. Is that what your conclusion is?
Yes, indeed. The only thing that you need to know then, you have the actual item that you need, and you just need to use it wisely. And it's very important to use it wisely. If people used antibiotics for every little thing that may come around, the common cold, other things that are viruses and not bacterial at all, antibiotics only kill bacteria, not viruses, then you're really wasting what will be, and certainly in true survival settings, very, very precious commodities. So the important thing to do is to read about. We have lots of articles on our website at doomandbloom.net about how to use antibiotics wisely. We talk about a number of different antibiotics that are available in veterinary equivalents, and I think that anybody who is into preparedness should have a supply available. The funny thing is that even though I was the first, at least medical guy to write about it, I don't sell this stuff. And this is something that I felt was unethical for me as a physician to sell antibiotics to people. And so apparently a cottage industry seems to have arisen around fish antibiotics and avian antibiotics. You can find them in a lot of areas.
And when you get these, because I've got quite a few of myself, they typically only have about a 1 year lifespan on them before they hit the expiration date. How concerned should we be with that expiration date, and how far out from that date do you think that they would still be usable?
I believe that they're usable for years afterwards, and I'll tell you why. In the U.S. government, the Department of Defense has warehouses full of antibiotics and many other various types of medications that would be useful in disasters, natural disasters and other situations. And what they did in the old days is whenever the expiration date came around, they would get the forklifts out and they would throw away millions, maybe billions of dollars worth of these antibiotics and other types of medicines. Well, as you can imagine, they took a look at it and say, hey, this is a lot of money we're throwing away. I wonder if these things are still good. So they did a special experiment called the Shelf Life Extension Plan or Program, and they tested over 122 different medications, including a bunch of antibiotics. And they found that as long as they were in pill or capsule form, that they actually lasted for 2 to 10 years after the expiration date on the bottle at 100% potency. And when I say that they are 100% potent, I mean that they are just as useful after the expiration date as they were beforehand. Over the course of time, they might lose potency somewhat, but there was actually a pharmacy, I think in San Diego, that had some kind of storage room that most of the people didn't know about. They figured out that there was a room there. They opened it up, and they found a bunch of medicines that were 28 to 40 years expired. And they found that of the 14 active ingredients in the various medicines, that 12 of them were still at 100% potency. Matter of fact, some of them were even more than 100% because the gelatin or the capsules and some of the other preparations had degraded more than the active ingredients.
And so they may lose potency, but something like fish antibiotics, they would never become toxic. They would never spoil.
No,
is that correct?
You will not grow a horn in the middle of your forehead as a result of using expired antibiotics. Now, I promise you. Now, I will say this, that there is a story going around about tetracycline, if it's more than a year overdue, or rather expired, that it causes damage to kidneys and liver. But those reports are all from the 1960s and 70s. Since that time, the formulation for tetracycline has changed, and there haven't been any new reports since then. Having said that, tetracycline is a first-generation medication, and as a first-generation antibiotic, there's a lot of resistance that's built up around it. It's not one of my top 10, let's say, antibiotics that I would want you to stockpile.
That's the end of the first half of my interview with Dr. Bones from doomandbloom.net. Tune in next week for the rest of the show.
Get prepared before disaster strikes. PrepperRecon.com offers MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits for your home, auto, or bug-out bag. These kits have everything you need to address a traumatic injury, including an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, EMT shears, suture kit, steri-strips, tourniquet, tough strip bandages, and so much more. $99 includes shipping. Go to PrepperRecon.com and click the Store tab at the top of the home page. Order today before it's too late.